That should do it. It started. What
Awesome.
is, all right, you ready? All right,
Yep.
we're going to get right into it. What is up, you guys? Welcome back to episode 27 of the Lombard Trucking Show. I'm glad you can all be here. It's my first time on video. This is a very uncommon thing, so excuse any of my pauses or something, but it's tough to look at myself and talk. Normally I do this while I drive, or normally I just sit on my bed like this and talk and go in deep in conversation with myself. So we're here though, as promised, video. I have a special guest with me, good friend, longtime listener, A1 since day one. My friend Zoe out there in Oklahoma. She's here to talk to us today about what the hell is going on in the oil and gas industry. We're going to get into the inside baseball on that. So with that, I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell us why she's qualified to talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Hey, y'all. I'm excited to be on. Thanks, Mike, for having me. I'm honored to be the first guest, but let's get right into it. So I am 26 years old. I went down to Texas A&M for my undergrad in geosciences. Knew I wanted to apply that to something related to energy in general. Um, Took a bunch of petroleum related classes, be that geology, geography, everything. A&M offers a lot of oil related classes, big surprise if you're familiar. Um, and then I ended up staying for my master's and got my master's in geosciences. From there, I was really fortunate to get a internship right off the bat. It was 2020 when I graduated with my master's. Um, and I went to work with this really small environmental consultant. And if you don't know what an environmental consultant is, they can do like a wide variety of work from anywhere from, oh gosh, sorry.
Uh oh.
The first foul of like, all right, the first party foul. Okay, so environmental consultants, they can get hired to do anything from construction related things. They'll be out there making sure the ground is solid. You can do you can hire a consultant to do a phase one, an environmental assessment before you buy a property. They'll look into the history of the surrounding areas, if there's been a spill or some type of contaminant that you would be liable for once you purchase the property, things like that. In my case, this environmental consultant I worked for down in College Station, Texas, it was 99% oil and gas. So I was out in oil fields for the entire summer. Um, Being the only female, it was really interesting. And by only female, I quite literally mean only female. I learned real quick that sometimes you gotta pee behind a tree or just not have the comforts and luxury of like a normal office space. That's fine, that's good. Um, but I really and truly fell in love with the industry. I love the people. I think oil and gas gets a really bad reputation. Um, and I think it's wrongfully so. Um, but that being said, at the end of my internship, the company was so small and it being 2020, they were really unable to keep me and hire me on full time. So I ended up going about 6 months without working in the oil and gas industry. I would recommend to any listener who's interested in prices specifically to get a rig zone account, and we can link that later if you want. But that will send you reports every single day at the end of uh, like, gosh, I'm blanking. When like Wall Street closes for the day.
Oh
So
yeah, when they close the financial markets and stuff. Yeah, I get
yeah.
those emails now too. Since you told me to sign up for it, it is great. I was going to mention it at the end of the podcast, but if people if people hear it now, yeah, Rig Zone, sign up. You'll get email updates about stuff going on, and because obviously oil is in the global market.
Oh yeah, they get into they'll link current events, but mostly the daily report is a rundown on prices, international and domestic. So I kind of stayed on top of things with that. I also am studying for my professional geologist stamp. It's kind of like a professional engineer. Most of y'all might be familiar with that because it's a little more popular, but PG, basically the same thing, but for geology, my stamp and name would go on reports and stuff. So yeah, studying for that right now. It's a big test. So I continued doing that, and then I applied for jobs. I worked at Orange Theory, shout out Lakeline, where I met Mike and Drea.
That's my
And
wife. Yep, that's my wife, who I mentioned on the podcast. And when I'm not over the road, that's where I'm at, getting my workouts in.
heck yeah. So then I ended up getting this job opportunity for another environmental consultant up in Oklahoma and took that. Worked for them for about a year, and then I'm now with my current company. We do not only oil and gas related, but we do a lot of work for hydroelectric dams, uh, big electrical companies in general. Like we go out and inspect substations to keep them in compliance with the DEQ and EPA. So we'll do regulatory stuff, compliance, and then if there's spills, we'll go out and we'll sample, we'll delineate, which means we'll figure out, like, especially if it's underground, you have to figure out how far out and how deep it went. So we'll delineate and basically take samples all over the place and then map out what came back hot, what didn't, and then we figure out a plan of how to remediate and clean up the spill and bring it back to normal. A lot of people don't realize that most oil and gas companies lease their land from ranchers. So people think that, like, oh, if a oil company loses like 10,000 barrels, they don't care because they make so much money off of it. In this economy, no. First of all, they're losing product. Second of all, they're about to spend millions cleaning it up. Third of all, they have the landowner to account for. So they're going to be pissed. They're going to be pissed if their cattle die. They're going to be pissed if their ponds are contaminated. They're going to be pissed if there's even a shadow of a doubt that their cattle died because of something that a oil and gas company did.
Oh, because
So,
they could terminate that lease. See, I didn't know that. I had figured it was owned. It was either state owned land or they bought it from these people. But yeah, I didn't. So some of these people out there, yeah, because they could just end the lease or kick them
or
off.
just rack up millions. I mean, they can do anything. And even, so yeah, I would say, gosh, I've been on some projects that were BLM land, Bureau of Land Management. But that probably accounted for like 5% of the work I've been on. Usually it's people's own personal ranches. If they'll warn you, like, if you shoot a snake, if you kill a cattle, like there's literally price points of how much you would owe that landowner for killing a snake even. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So they're a lot more careful than people think in that regard. But also, I've said it before and people were like in a fury about it. They were just in a fit about it. I said once on Facebook that the oil and gas industry is one of the most environmentally conscious, environmentally friendly, maybe even industries out there. And people were just
I'm
like, that's absolutely not true.
No, I'm glad you said that because similar things to like hunters. People say that about people
Mm-hmm.
go hunt, like the people who care the most about the environment people who go hunting because they want it to be unkept and left alone. And yeah, when it comes to the people who are probably watching, reading the fine lines, the oil and gas industry is doing it you know more than most, I'd imagine. But see, most people don't know. Most people wouldn't assume that because of just what they see.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So that plays a big factor into it. Just the fact that they're on someone else's land that family has probably owned for generations, especially down in Texas and Oklahoma too. Um, and then another thing, just for the amount of regulations from federal and state level government and agencies, there's so many environmental regulations. So probably the most out of any industry. So like Um,
I wonder how they can compare up to the Department of Transportation.
that's what I was actually about to give as an example. And I was thinking, I wonder, but if you think about like, I mean, I'm sure everything has their regulations, but especially if you compare between renewables and oil and gas, um, it's like tenfold. Just because, especially the government is trying to promote renewables and they're trying to make their lives a little easier. So between the regulations, all the compliance work you need to do, it's hard not to be on the up and up, I guess, especially with oil and gas companies being in the spotlight right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's good, and we'll actually touch on that in a little bit. But you were talking about what you've been doing lately, in your current job. Working where you're at. So what have you been doing like within the past few weeks? You had mentioned that you had been out to the West Memphis area. So what were you doing out there?
Yeah, so a lot of gas stations lately are looking at switching their E15 or ethanol blends to E15, meaning that up to 15% of the gasoline or diesel uh, is going to have ethanol. Um, so higher ethanol percentage than what they normally carry. Most consumers are livid about that.
And why is that? Because I've been hearing about that too.
So ethanol, I don't really, I'm not certain about all the mechanics behind it, but it's not good for your car basically.
Okay, so
And
yeah, it's not as yeah, it doesn't.
it's not as efficient. It might corrode. I'm not really sure exactly what it does. I'd love if one of your listeners knows why or what's up with that. I'd love to know the answer. But so
Yeah,
we
hopefully
were
somebody reaches out because I want to know. I'm sure there's got to be some farmer, somebody in agriculture who hopefully listens who knows what ethanol does. Because I mean, I
yeah,
remember, because I have no idea what it is. I mean, I
or
just
even
some
even the
places say
mechanics.
biodiesel. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, any mechanics who know, yeah, please reach out to
It's
know what the deal with the ethanol is. So you've been out there testing
yeah,
their
it's
stuff.
actually interesting though because ethanol that is from Brazil, which is mostly sugarcane, that runs easier on your cars and trucks than U.S. ethanol, which is corn.
I was gonna say I knew that ethanol was corn. I had no idea that we got ethanol from Brazil like that. See, there's a lot of stuff people don't know that goes into all this. So that's pretty cool. So you've been going to fuel stations and just testing there.
Yeah, so we basically go and look at their inventory and see because ethanol is hard on mechanics. We go and see what they currently have and if ethanol would work for their specific store.
Ah, okay, gotcha. So that's what.
So
So no, that's pretty
and
cool. And you've been getting pushback from it from places.
yeah, so I've and really I'm not even familiar enough with the equipment to know by looking at it. I would assume the newer stuff would work better with E15 is what they call it, but um I had a store manager who was asking me what we were doing and I was telling him and he was like, "Oh, please fail us. Fail us because we do not want E15. Our customers don't want it, we don't want it." And I was like, "Oh, well, it's not really pass or fail, I'm trying to explain it to him." And he's like, "Just fail me." And I'm like, okay.
No, that's
um,
funny.
Aside from that, gosh, last week I was out in Cushing, Oklahoma. I don't know if you're familiar with Cushing, but that's the nation's largest storage hub for oil reserves. That's where our nation's um, reserves are.
That's where
Um,
what they've been talking about how how we've been releasing supply
yeah,
from. I know that there's a lot in Louisiana, but yeah,
yeah,
I had no idea about Oklahoma. So that's cool.
yeah, Cushing, Oklahoma. So I was out there. They're uh, they're basically called tank farms. If you look at it from a map, it's like the whole entire area is just storage tanks, and some above ground pipeline. We had a client who had a little bit of a spill situation, so I went out there and just took some samples. It really wasn't that much. It was only a few barrels worth, which a barrel is 43 gallons. And so a few barrels worth, and in that case, that's a super easy cleanup because it was above ground. If it was underground, that'd be a different story, but they were able to just excavate all the stained soil dirt. They take it to a landfill that can handle hazardous waste or special waste. And then I come over and I sample and make sure they got everything. And then once I look at the lab results and say yes, you're good to go, then they can fill it in with sand or dirt or however they want to fill in that hole. I've been out, gosh, I was out one time and I get to this site and I'm like, it doesn't look like you had a spill out here. And they're like, well, yeah, we covered it up. And I was like, okay, that's actually not what you're supposed to do, but
Oh man, hopefully this will get the view counters up on this one. Hopefully some people are going to see this now. Some feds might be taking trips out to Oklahoma shortly to go check out that land.
You know, it happens, but people don't know, and that's why they hire an environmental consultant.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. That sums it up well. And if and that's I learned something new, and I'm glad. That's why I'm having you on. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted you on is because you mentioned earlier about you going to A&M. And you also mentioned how you've made a post on Facebook talking about how oil and gas is very environmentally friendly, especially how they act and how people disagreed with that. But it's like you're the person who took classes specific to oil and gas and petroleum, whereas I have friends of mine who claim to be conscious of the environment and claim that they want to help the environment, but it's like they haven't taken one oil and gas class. And it's like, that's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to have you on, because you're somebody you've taken one class about the oil and gas industry, which makes you more qualified than 99% of people on the internet, including myself. So yeah, no, it's very important. And what you're doing now is very cool, and kind of segueing on into that with what you do now with consulting and people who do spills. So obviously there are accidents that happen in this industry. Oils, spill. I remember the BP oil spill happening and stuff like that. So how do you feel kind of about the future of energy? Where do you think the country's going? What are your thoughts about climate change? And what could we do to what's your opinions on all that? Just about the future and what we can do with climate change.
Well, how much time do we have?
I know, because I could go right inside the Loves right now and grab a 12 pack, and we could probably talk about that until sunrise.
Shoot, honestly, we might have to make this a part two, but
yeah, we could easily do. Yeah, we'll definitely do a follow up, because I hope to get some questions, and then we'll bring you on for round two.
Yeah, so first we'll touch on like climate change. My most like superficial statement I'll say is like, if climate change wasn't on some level natural, we'd still be in an ice age. That's like
Oh yeah, there's definitely there's no argument against how the planet has gone through cycles as such. Absolutely.
And then people will say, well, this is the fastest the climate's warming. That's not necessarily true. Back when I was at A&M, there's this really cool research program that A&M operates, actually. It's called the International Ocean Discovery Program, and they took an old drill rig, converted it into a research cruise ship, and they'll go out and drill down and recover ocean cores for research purposes. So I was with a professor for, probably 4 years between my undergrad and master's, and we were studying the Pliocene-Pleistocene boundary, which was a time in history much like this transitional phase is now. And so I was studying ocean core sediments from that time period, specifically the fossils, and how the species changed, because there's like cold bugs that like cold water more than bugs that like warm water, and vice versa, if that makes sense. So we were studying like how quickly the change was from like it being more cold species to warm species. So that was kind of interesting. Like I said, people think that this is an anomaly, and it's really not. But yeah, I don't know how much more I want to say on that at the moment.
People. Yeah, well, I'm glad you said what you said, because it touches on a little controversial and a little edgy side, but you're coming at it from a way that like I said, not a lot of people hear about. You're talking about an old rig, that they converted, and they're going down and studying fossils. And this is a guy, whereas most people just they saw their favorite celebrity on Twitter say we're killing the planet, and so they're like, well, I guess we're killing the planet. And it's like, look, I and me, just from my own perspective, we're obviously adding something into the atmosphere that if we didn't use technology, we wouldn't. So, is there something we're doing and doing to the planet? I mean, you can't just be like no, because we are. We are emitting stuff
Yeah.
into the atmosphere. Is it as damaging as much? Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to have your professor on because I'm sure he'd love to have conversations. But those aren't the people who get the airtime. They're not the ones on TV. And then when they
Exactly.
do, and these people always, and they'll end up on Joe Rogan, and then they want to kill Joe Rogan.
Side note, I just thought of this that I want to mention too. So there's a rig to reef program. Um, the Gulf of Mexico, specifically where they do it, the Gulf of Mexico is basically like a desert. There's not a lot of vegetation, not a lot of animals out there because there's not a lot of coral reefs. And the reefs is where they grow their food. There's habitat. You know, uh, Fish can like live there and grow their community. Right now, they're taking old rigs and literally setting them out there, and then algae grows on the rig, and then fish come, and so they're literally building ecosystems essentially, like in the desert that is the Gulf of Mexico, because they have these rigs. Isn't that
Oh,
kind of
that's
cool?
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's awesome. And people need to know about that, and hopefully
yeah,
people hear that. That's an awesome thing. So,
yeah,
okay, so we're regrowing the ecosystem in the Gulf of Mexico, which is pretty dope. But obviously, there's going to be people. The general idea is, to want to move away from oil and gas, so to speak. What do you think about the future? I've mentioned on the podcast before, I'm very big on the nuclear energy, just from
yeah,
the stance of it being, I mean, of it being the safest and best and most efficient. Because right now, when it comes to the renewables, like we mentioned, the wind and solar, they can't do what natural gas, coal, and oil are doing, which is still so many of our cities are run on coal still. I post the pictures of the trains, but nuclear energy puts all of it in the dust. So how do you feel about like the future of energy consumption? And
yeah. I mean, I'm all for renewables. I think they're awesome, and there's a time and a place for it. But today is not the time for a 100% conversion to renewables. It's just not. It doesn't make sense. In as far as infrastructure goes, it doesn't make sense economically, and it doesn't even make sense environmentally because, like, people don't realize I go out to substations and do inspections at electrical substations because they have oil. So people don't realize that like those generators are full of oil. And I have to go out there and inspect them because if there's leaks, if there's whatever, I need to take care of that. And those, especially substations, can be in the middle of literally nowhere where these companies haven't even been out there in months unless there's like a huge, like a fire or something obvious that they're like, oh, we got to get out there. Like it could be leaking and they don't know it. Um, and then, gosh, like wind turbines, the bane of my existence. Cool concept, but I wish in a perfect Zoe world we would have um, perfected them on a small scale and then put them everywhere because they are super temperamental. They can only operate between like at least X amount miles per hour, but no more than X amount of miles per hour. And
really, so they're
if
they're
it's too
limited.
windy, yeah,
Wow.
if it's too windy, they're gonna break. So they turn off. Uh, they take 20 years to pay for themselves, and they have a 20-year life expectancy. And then once they die, they go to wind turbine graveyards. You can literally Google wind turbine graveyard, and it's just they just put them in the ground. And I mean, if you think about like the paint, all the chemicals that are on it, obviously the metal. A lot of people will argue that and be like, oh, well, they'll recycle parts or they'll reuse parts. That's few and far between. That's like the company that has the means to do so. Um, And then even transporting them. I mean, you've got to see it all the time where one huge semi is hauling one blade.
One
Like, are
blade,
you
yeah.
kidding? Yeah.
One does. Yeah, they go in. I see them all the time on high, especially in places like Texas, and when you're on I-20 and I-10. Oh yeah, you'll get there'll be a convoy of three trucks with the big huge blade with the type of thing. Then those guys are getting paid. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're talking about the burning of hundreds of gallons of diesel fuel to go out there. That's the thing. I have always thought about things like windmills as like the knee jerk, reaction to this. Like, oh, if we could just build more. But like you said, I mean, we're putting them in there's a finite amount of energy that can come from these windmills, and if we just want to flip the switch, like, you're talking about hospitals going dark, in a matter of minutes. If we tried to flip the switch into renewables right now, I mean, you wouldn't be able to get to the general store down the road from your house, quick enough to get food.
No.
We're really held together on a thin line of stuff. So I mean, like I said, is there a way to bridge the gap into it? But I mean, I don't think the government should be picking the winners and losers on it. And there's the answer. Like I said, I'm pro nuclear, but I mean, it's good. I mean, you're for the renewables. You want to move to better and safer energy consumption. Like obviously, you don't, oil and gas is obviously king right now, but there's always accidents, there's spills, and there's ways, and there's ways to hopefully make that better. So that's cool. No, I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I can't wait to
Yeah.
hear some feedback.
Yeah. And I mean, there's ways. So also what kills me is like government restrictions, because there's ways to make oil and gas safer for right now. Like obviously, like you said, we're not switching overnight. So how can we make the best of what we have right now? Pipelines are the safest way to transport oil. And we have all like the Keystone pipeline shutdown. That should never have happened, in my opinion, of course. But like you said, transporting it is pretty dangerous. You can transport it by truck. What if the truck, gets in an accident? Pipeline is the safest way to transport. But people don't like it. It's not aesthetically pleasing if it's above ground. That's probably the safest, because if there's a leak or something, you know exactly where it is. You can clean it up the fastest, and that's also probably the cheapest way to do it. But underground pipeline is not a bad option either. It's protected. As long as it's installed right, there really should be no issues to it. And then the environment can go back to how it looked before. Or if it's farm, it can go back to being used for farmland. So pipeline is a huge deal that the government is definitely restricting, and I think that's for the worst in this case. What else?
I mean, and yeah, we see, and we see that going on with well, in Europe right now. Obviously the pipelines are being politicized because, I mean, the pipelines go from country to country. We're fortunate enough to where we could, if we invested more in these pipelines, I mean, we don't have to worry about wars with Canada and Mexico, so we can all work together on that. And yeah, I never even thought of pipelines being like just quote unsafe. Like if we really want to talk about helping the environment, let's make the flow of that energy better.
Yeah, any professional in the environmental world. Well, I say that, but then there's like a bunch of people who are like, I hate oil and gas or whatever, that are like environmental people. Any oil and gas professional will tell you that pipeline is the safest option. It just is. Sorry if you hear Pecos like banging on the door out there.
Pagos is their dog for anybody listening to this on the audio. He's a wild boy, but awesome. But all right, so let's we've been talking for a while. Let's get right into hopefully why people wanted to tune in. I remember back in 2008, I was 18 and I was getting ready to go. I remember it was right before I had gone to basic training for the Marines. Gas was 4.34 a gallon, in Waterbury, back in Connecticut, and you know, uh, summer '08, I still managed to have fun, but you were a baller if you had a full tank back then. I remember it was always so funny. And then I got back from boot camp, and gas was a buck 80 at this same gas station. So it was and I always said, I always had this rolling joke, like what was their gold in the gas before they did this. So I remember that happening, and my parents always talked about what happened in the '70s, and that was kind of linked to the Arab oil embargo. But so what's going on right now? Why in your eyes and in your professional opinion, why are the prices, sky high at the moment? Is it, or can we blame just blame it on Vladimir Putin? Can we, what's the real cause behind it?
So, I don't know if you're familiar with how pricing works. Pricing. So, if you look on RigZone, they're setting prices for October right now. So the prices, if Biden goes to OPEC next week and is like, can you make gas $1 a gallon, and it just so happens the next day gas is so much cheaper, that is not from that event. That it's completely unrelated. They set prices about 6 weeks out. I don't really know why they do that. That's just how they do it.
Well, I look at OPEC like a cartel.
Yeah. But no. And then gas prices are set in U.S. dollars. What else? Right now, I know that. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna switch over to my big zone that I screenshot from last night.
Go for
all
it.
right. First sentence. Oil rose after a government report showed the U.S. is exporting a record number of crude and refined products as the market waits to learn whether nuclear negotiations will clear a path for Iran to sell more oil. So I wanted to talk about how we're exporting a record number of crude and refined products. A lot of people are, a lot of people might be upset about that. Like, why aren't we keeping the crude and refined products for ourselves? The issue is that our refineries are set up to refine sour crude. And in the U.S., we produce more sweet crude. So sweet crude is less acidic and it's a lot easier to refine. And I'm sure there's an interesting reason of why the U.S. is set up to produce or to refine sour crude. It's more of like a globalist stance on it. But so we export our sweet crude to countries that are able to refine it, and then we import sour crude, which is a lot cheaper than sweet crude, and then we refine it here. It's a bit more technically challenging to refine sour crude. So sometimes like less advanced countries or less developed countries are more likely to refine sweet crude. But that's why we can't just, we're producing so much, why can't we just keep it here and make it cheaper for us? That's why.
We're not equipped to refine the oil that we're exporting, is what you're saying. Yeah.
And you can't just build that overnight. So
okay, so yeah, okay, so so no, I think that's something. I remember we had talked about this offline before. You had mentioned this about what you keep saying, sweet and sour. It makes me think of Sour Patch Kids. So I mean, production has ramped up, but we just don't have the facilities to refine the type of oil that we're actively exporting, which makes sense. So it's a supply. It right down to it. It's a supply issue of why fuel prices have gone up.
And then we're basically relying on OPEC, who there's a lot of people who are saying that OPEC is not able to produce more at the moment, which may be the case, or that they just don't want to because they're a cartel. They can literally do whatever they want. So that I'm not really sure what I think the case is, whether they're just like fucking us over because they can, or if they really are not able to produce anymore right now. I'm not really sure.
No, okay. So, so if you're saying, so there's really nothing we can kind of do to lower the price besides increase supply. What do you think going into, we've made it through summer, Labor Day's coming. What's your prediction on the price of gas for some people, for the listeners? What do you think? You hopeful? You optimistic? I'm a glass half full guy, so I've been happier now. Like lately, with fuel prices, like, yeah, it's still high. It's in the fours. I got one for, I got some for $3.98. It's not ideal, but can we be hopeful or what?
They always say summer driving season is most expensive, so we're closing out on summer, and that way it should be looking a little cheaper. I've noticed that price has also been affected a lot by different COVID strains coming out, different variants. It'll go up if there's a new issue or like blow up of case numbers. Even not only domestically, but also like in China, where they're shutting down villages and cities and stuff. That affects gas too, just with like moving it, even like shipping it over, however they move it. And they also lean into like just what they think might happen.
It's
With
which
like,
is which I find funny. Yeah, and I've read that before that they're basing the price off of the future.
yeah, they base
Um,
the price off of like how they feel like you and I are feeling. If they think we're feeling like going out and having fun, then they might lower the price because we'll be using more gas to get out. If they think that we're worried about COVID, they're gonna raise the price because supply and demand. Um, but yeah, so
that's what so they're really going on social media and judging
honestly,
people.
yeah, I
Yeah,
really think so. And then also, oh gosh, oh, and then politics, of course. Whatever political environment plays a role. Are midterms coming up?
yeah. There's a lot of Senate and House seats
Yeah.
up for grabs in this November. So I'm sure prices will probably come down in November. That's my prediction.
We will see, but yeah, should be getting a little better in the next few weeks, I would say.
All right, good. So you heard it from Zoe. Everyone should out there should keep their head up. I think this is a good conversation. We went on for a while. We're at 37 minutes right now. Is there anything else you want to leave anybody with? Anything you want to leave out? Any fun facts? Anything?
Yeah,
What do you got?
I would love to give a fun fact. This also caught my eye off a Rig Zone report yesterday. Let me pull it up again. Chevron is exploring peanuts as a renewable fuel source. Approximately 20% of U.S. peanut crop is produced in Texas. So, fun fact about oil and gas companies, especially the big ones, when oil is doing well and they're making money. Oh, side note, I gotta say, this is also people will say, oh, oil companies can lower prices because they're doing so well. They're making millions every day. Overall, no, they're not. They lost a fuck ton during COVID. So they're like probably just at even right now if you take into account the last few years. Anyways, when oil is doing well, big companies are able to run little side teams for research and development on different renewable options. So I remember Shell did an algae study a few years back. And that was really big. Like all my friends were like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like they're studying algae and how to turn that into fuel. So yeah, I guess Chevron is working on peanuts right now.
No, that's actually pretty dope. I mean, I figured they must have some excess cash laying around now because they definitely had quite the boon over the summer. So no, that'd be pretty cool to see in the future. We'll have to check back in on that. But
Yeah.
no, that's good. I'm glad you came on. We're gonna have you on for part two though, because we'll dive deeper into some of the climate change stuff because it's interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people and everybody on social media has opinions. I've got them and I share them, often too. But a lot of people like at the end of the day, it's just what does some fucking actor in Hollywood really know? I mean, they go and they say that, oh, I talked to a scientist, and it's like, but did they go to A&M? Did they take one class? Did they try to learn anything more besides talking to somebody who's within their own echo chamber? And that's a big reason why I wanted to have you on, is because It's a way for hopefully people to get outside of their echo chamber and have that conversation with people as opposed to just being like, no, you're wrong, shut up. Like, anybody who's gonna, if anybody gives me
Yeah.
feedback like, I don't like the person you just had on your podcast, and it's just like, well, I mean, what are you, stand your credentials up to her, and if you're just gonna quote, whatever. So if you're just going to quote whatever name you saw on Twitter that had MD next to the name, then so be it. I can't change everybody's mind, but that's why I wanted to have you on. So thank you. No, I
Well, I
appreciate it.
appreciate it. It was fun chatting.
No, it's good. It's good to chat. Good to catch up. Normally when I talk to people, it's only over the phone. So it's cool to do. It's cool to do a video like this, and
Yeah.
hopefully, and for anybody who made it to the end who's still listening, now that I can figure out this StreamYard thing, I might just have to go ahead and pay for the damn thing, for
Yeah.
whatever the service is. I'll put maybe I can put it under the business account, put it on the business name, so
You're
I
gonna
can
have
so I can
to
get some more guests on.
you're gonna have to tell me more about the environmental stuff that truckers have to deal with, because I am interested, especially like the California stuff, how it's different with exhaust and things.
Oh yes, I mean, and I could say that. I'll actually say that right now. So obviously, newer trucks are equipped with diesel exhaust systems, which clean the emissions of the truck. So it's not emitting carbon because it sprays this diesel exhaust fluid, which is actually genetically modified urine. It smells just like piss. It's like it has urea in it and water, and it sprays in the engine and cleans the emissions. Now, you don't so technically, like you're required to have it, and in California, if you get caught, you'll get boned really heavy. But a lot of guys will go into the computer of their truck and delete the DPF system, and they do this to save money and also because the DPF system has a lot of sensors, it can cause problems and it'll shut you down. So they'll delete it, so that way that they don't have, they'll just keep the def tank full, but it's not using any def. But if you get caught, but guys, when they do that, they just won't go to California because you'll get a full thing on there. But now I can't do that, and I probably won't do it because I'm too guilty to do it. But yeah, no, there's a lot more into it. Like there's the IFTA fuel tax licenses. There's a whole bunch of you know shit like that, and there's stuff that's changing too. I mean, electric trucks are on the way. Tesla wants one, and I know Freightliner's coming out with one. We'll see how they do in Minnesota in December, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have you back on soon. We'll definitely chat.
Sweet.
This makes for good content. So
Yeah,
I'll
for
just
sure.
but yeah, let's close it out there. Appreciate everyone for listening. If you got any questions, if you want me to ask Zoe any questions, reach out to me and I'll send them her way, and we'll make for another episode, another video.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Well, drive safe, Mike. Good talking to you.
Good talking to you too, and we'll see you on the next one.